Welcome to the Advisor's Edge. I'm Chad Ramberg here today with Jarrod Upton. The show is about helping advisors think more clearly about real decisions that shape their advisory firm. Risk, clients, compliance, long-term durability is really what it's all about. And the fun thing about Jarrod is we've met originally in 2019. And so I'm really happy that you joined us today. There's a lot of experience that you have and a lot of exciting things coming along. So let's get into it, Jarrod.
Great. Well, Chad, thanks so much for having me today. I'm super excited to be able to join and really have a great discussion about clarity, discipline, and really turning vision and execution for the growing advisory firm. So it's an area that I'm passionate about. I've got a heart for, so I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, and you and I always have good discussions. And I think back to put a little bit of a personal spin on it. It was NAPFA conference in the fall of 2019 or maybe spring. I don't know. Anyhow, back there somewhere, we just bumped into each other and then we were having dinner and you and I got deep into a discussion and kind of connected at I would say a process level, which is interesting. And you had just been at that point. Give us a little background of kind of your experience in the industry, because you met with some box leadership before I did and interviewed, and we've always been kind of floating around the same world, if you will.
Yeah, so my background experience really my background experience has really been a progression through the industry, really about how you take discipline and turn it into execution. I'm a CFP by trade. As an advisor, I've served in an advisory role. I was a partner in a wealth firm, sold that a number of years ago, and then I was a very large national growth RIA, United Capital. We took that firm and ultimately sold to Goldman. And then I was a partner and a consultant with Herbers and Company as a consulting organization. That's where we met at. And over the progression of my experience, it's all about really helping advisors to make better decisions, have better clarity on where they're going, but really understand why they're going, which is really related to my latest iteration. Is I'm an EOS Implementer today, and it's really taking and working with businesses and the advisory community of helping them to take and build clarity and ultimately drive to execution. That's, again, I've got a heart and passion for that. But when you hit on process, it comes back to what is the process for that? Do we have a clear, defined process to be able to have accountability in the organization? So we're making better decisions and frankly, growing a better organization.
Yeah, and that's absolutely interesting to me, because when we talk about EOS, it's a process or a structure, a business structure, operating system, really. I think is what the OS stands for. What's the E stand for?
Entrepreneur
I should
operating
know this.
system.
Okay, all right. So, and when you entrepreneurial, absolutely. And the funny thing that gets in that, I think back to the book of, what is it, where he talks about the entrepreneurial itch. Well, there's traction about EOS, but I'm thinking back to an older book where the guy talks about having an entrepreneurial itch and going and starting a business, and then you kind of find out all the things you didn't know. And
yeah,
gosh darn it,
is that
I should remember.
Is it the E-Myth?
The E-Myth. That's right. That's right. And it all kind of connects together in my head as we're looking at this. But for EOS was built more for really any business as far as a platform or a way of operating. Is that right?
Yeah, EOS can be applicable to any business. It's really a business operating system or operating structure. And so it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it can be applicable across any business. I found in the advisory space that firms that commit to it and think through, how do I run my business better? How do I have more consistency? How do I have better accountability with my team? It really fits in, and dovetails well within those organizations. And frankly, the clients that I've had the privilege to work with over the years that ran on EOS or were implementing EOS, they were often sometimes the most fun, and they were also sometimes the fastest growing organizations because they are running on a system built around data versus emotion.
Right, right. No, we get challenged with that every day because we're emotional creatures and we want to do best for our clients. So I'm wondering, because you've worked with businesses both inside and outside the financial services to a degree. I mean, you're a business guy is the way I think of it. Is you've just chosen to focus on financial services and you've got a lot of history there. So you talked a little bit about the differences in it. So, and it's coming up a lot with firms that want to grow. They'll see the book sitting back here, Traction, and they'll be like, hey, that's interesting. And so it seems to be in the financial services, there's an interest in EOS and how to apply that. How have you found when a firm starts to apply it, what's the best benefits that they kind of see right up front, or maybe what draws them to it?
So often when I see firms Tractor, they've read the book Traction, is really there's pain points. I mean, they're struggling with something, they're not executing or they're not clicking on all cylinders in their organization. And so there tends to be a little bit of pain. They may have been successful in spite of themselves, but they'll hit a plateau and they can't quite get to that next level of growth. And so one of the things when I am engaging with them, I want them to define what growth looks like to them. And is it growth for growth's sake? Is it growth for revenue? Is it growth for intent or purpose? I want to really dig deeper into the underlying reason and rationale of what they're looking to define. And then that's really what becomes the apparatus of their why. Where are they working to move forward? And the biggest single benefit that I see that they're coming in is that once we define that and we clarify that for the organization, everybody else knows what we're trying to do. It's not just go serve the clients and just go get more business and try to think about what our fees are for the revenue of the organization. It's looking at what is our 1, 3, 10-year long range goals actually look like, and because then it becomes shared by all in the organization. That is what I often will see up front. One of the biggest single benefits of understanding that clarity of vision, and then they can pull it all the way down into the discipline and accountability to execute on it.
Okay, so if I'm understanding properly, what you're saying is that just helps give them, because nobody starts an RIA just for no reason at all. There's always a good reason behind it, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then sometimes when they get into it, you get things going, I've had business owners say, oh, you just got to make a beautiful mess. Okay. And when you get to that point, you're like, okay, now I know I can do it, but then you got to get some structure around it. And so what I hear you saying is really helps take that vision and that goal, help put a structure around it so you can grow at a more intentional pace, which often means faster growth. Is that accurate, or what am I missing in there? I'm probably missing something.
I would say it's accurate, but it's the sustainable growth. It's that sustained engagement, but it's pulling back to the heart of it. I mean, a brief little story. The reason I got into the wealth space is really from a family situation. I had a conversation with my grandfather several years ago, and he had said, I wish I had someone that I trusted like you. And this is before I even came into the wealth industry. And he had an advisor that he had worked with, and the advisor gave him good advice, but he didn't trust them and didn't implement it. And he had about $2 million all in Enron stock. And the advisor said to diversify. He never did. And he wrote it all the way to the bottom. And that really left a mark on me of why I came into the industry and why I've spent my career on how to have that trust transfer to the end client, which EOS is just the latest iteration of that. Is how do you build a better system so that you're aligning trust with the end client, trust that they know, they value, they've got consistency. So that's really where almost if you think about a transformational engagement, why I'm still doing this today and why I've got a heart for it.
Yeah. It's funny how it goes back to kind of our personal side of it. I think of my grandma, my great grandma, actually, I was fortunate enough to know, always used to sit down with me and she said, you got to understand money. I'm in junior high and I know what money is, but when she said that, I didn't know what she means. And then I went into college saying, I want to understand money. I didn't know I'd end up in this field. I need to understand how it worked for business purposes and how to apply it, which is what those drivers that are set into us at a young age really come throughout our career, hopefully. And you've had, because with you've seen firms grow from small to very large. You mentioned
Mhm.
United Capital and kind of your journey there. Tell me something that's when you have a firm that wants to grow and develop, is there something that's kind of a through line on that? Meaning if there, we see a lot of stages like at 100 million, there's kind of a resistance there. I think it's kind of a mental resistance for like, oh, now we're SEC registered or something like that. But then there's also these resistant levels somewhere between 3 and 500 million and a billion and so on and so forth. Is there a through line of advice that when you're talking with a firm that wants to have high growth, what they should be thinking about and how to approach that? Because you've seen them at many different levels.
Yeah, that's a great question and an interesting question. I mean, there's a book that kind of automatically comes to the top of my head, and it's a book by Marshall Goldsmith. What got you here won't get you there. And it's a book about reinvention. And yes, you can relate it to EOS certainly as well. But when I've run in and worked with firms that are at 100 million in top line, or they're an AUM or a million top line or revenue approximately, and they have aspirations to become 300 or 500 million, they are going to be a different firm. And so it's really being willing to let go of the old and to have that spirit of reinvention. And there was a wonderful RIA leader that I talked to several years ago. And one of the things he shared with me was the speed of change equaled their speed of growth. And so the more willing that they were looking to adopt change, adopt the growth, and look for those opportunities on moving away from some of the old, that actually allowed for them to engage and move forward. That's the first thing. The second thing is I see so many firms that are owner or founder dependent, because that's really probably the second key reason why I see firms, they struggle moving past the million top line revenue or 100 million in AUM, is because that there's not enough trust built within the system and built within the organization to be able to have trust transfer, have clients start to transition to the next tier, lead advisor, associate advisor type of level, to allow that owner or that founder to be able to move up. And the term I think about is like delegate and elevate, is if you cannot delegate, you're not able to elevate yourself up to the next level. And so those are some things when I see the owner dependency is they're holding on to the old, or they're not transferring trust down to other team members to allow them to work and grow at higher levels.
That's great. Yeah, I think that would work at several of those resistance points. When you talk about personal change and willing to change, you're getting your PhD, right?
Yep. Yes.
Which is fascinating, because tell me why. You're a smart guy, you've had a lot of success. Why go out now and get your PhD?
Well, Chad, you're not the first one to ask me that question. Why get this at this stage in my career? And as I said a little bit earlier, is that my career has really been a series of steps about how do you have that exchange. And I've been able to live really in the practical application of that in so many different iterations, whether being in an RIA as an advisor, growing, selling, or being in an acquisitional business where we were buying RIAs and really doing a lot of change management, or consulting where I saw hundreds of different organizations. And the theme that I kept seeing is the same patterns repeating itself around that, engagement, that trust transfer, that owner dependency. And so I want to make sure that I, frankly, can leave something beyond me that can have practical application. So the PhD is really bridging the practical application with the research component that has data back to help support RIAs and the wealth industry to how to actually make better decisions, how to actually grow their firm, engage their talent and their team, and be healthier organizations for that. So that's really where I want to have the research that supports my career of practical application in so many different shapes and forms.
Yeah, because the practical application, the information and the understanding to apply that to the practical application, which the cool thing is that you've had so much practical application. And I think most of us intuitively start to learn things so we can figure it out. But what it sounds like is you really want to make sure that you're able to codify that so you can teach it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important thing to teach for the advisory? Yeah, you know, a lot of advisory firms out there. What do you think is important to teach them that's helpful for them to grow and develop? I know I'm asking the same question, a different angle. I'm trying to get in there because, yeah.
From a research basis, to me, I think it's going to be, how do you enhance talent engagement? How do we actually have a consistency of process? Because the big challenge I've seen for, I mean, frankly, last 2 decades has all been around the talent gap. Young kids are coming out of board registered programs, they're trying out in a wealth management firm, and frankly, within 3 years, they're exiting because they don't have the right structure, system, development opportunities for them to be able to grow. And so looking at, how do you bridge the gap? How do you have that trust transfer in a structured process-based system to develop up next talent generations? Now, there's been a lot of great things that have come out that the custodians have certainly helped with that. There's great systems in some of the different associations to help support that. But I believe that there can be more, and know that what took the founder to be successful, that the skill set for next gen talent might be a little bit different. And so how do you bridge the two together?
Interesting. So it's really about figuring out how to codify the best way for that transition from one generation to the next within the leadership of an RIA.
Correct. I mean,
Yeah.
the way I think about this, if everybody's heard of Apple or they have an iPhone, and it's a story of Steve Jobs versus Tim Cook. Very different personalities. Steve Jobs aggressively recruited Tim Cook to come and join. And you look at where Apple was at the point Tim Cook joined and what he's been able to do since Steve Jobs' passing. It's been revolutionary growth for that brand, but they're different personalities, they're different temperaments. And that's one of the risks I see, where advisors, founders are often looking to, in smaller and mid-sized companies, looking to find someone that's a replacement for themselves. But back to your earlier comment about the E-Myth, the minder, binder, grinder mentality, the business may need a different type of advisor, a different type of skill set, even though, yes, you want them to be entrepreneurial, but looking for someone that can manage and have sustainable growth versus that entrepreneurial bootstrap growth that you have to have at the startup.
Right. Or if you find somebody exactly like you, it's not going to go anywhere.
That's right. Typically.
I mean, maybe that's oversimplified, but
yeah.
And what's interesting is, for financial advisors, it's a relationship business, and it definitely is. But if you think of it purely as a relationship, when you're looking at the transition as a business matures and that original founder may be looking for an exit, how does relationship versus picking the right person, how does that play into it? Because I think a lot of us, because it's what we know how to do, is focus on the relationship, can actually miss some important aspects of supporting our business in that next level. So just comparing relationship to development of the organization, how does that fit?
So understanding what your need is in an organization, and having what the example is, what's our accountability chart? What's our leadership team that we have? And where is the core functions or dependencies that we need to be thinking about? So if I'm an advisor and I'm looking to get to the next level or look to exit, I want to make sure that whoever I'm bringing in first, they identify and align with our core values, and that they are a true value fit. I always go back to core values when I talk with organizations. They're like, oh yeah, we got our core values, but do people know them? Do they have them memorized? Can they commit to them? Is it a do as I say, not a do as I do type of environment? Or is it, yes, this is how we live, operate, screen, and we're willing to sometimes say no to business because they're not a value fit? So that's the first tier. Always look at an organization, are they a value fit? And then the third way that I look at that is, from an accountability standpoint, is, do they get it? Do they really get the job, the role that they're engaged with? Do they understand it? Do they want it? Do they want to be successful? Do they have the passion, desire, commitment? And then do they have the capacity and capability to do the job? And so this is when we start looking at next gen talent stepping up into leadership roles, or maybe even into ownership as a successor, is do they understand those things and are they value aligned? But it requires one key dependency. That owner, that founder has to be willing to let go to grow, to have the long-term sustainability and be a steward of the business.
Yeah, I found that's a tougher thing for most founders than they think it is, because in concept, it's like, yep, we've got it. That's the plan. And then you get into it and you're like, okay, letting go is a lot harder than practically speaking, it's a lot harder than it emotionally is for us as leaders sometimes. I want to spend a moment and just talk a little bit about other transition plans that you see. Sometimes it's joining in with a roll-up firm, or maybe just flat out selling out, or selling to a PE firm or something like that. Can we talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each one of those, just to give those listening something to think about if that's on their mind at all?
Yeah, I'll start out. Great question. I'll start out with saying that when I've talked with founders, talked with advisors, and I say, what are you working towards? Well, I'm just working towards cash flow, which is fine for now, but the business will transact either through death or divorce, possibly. I've seen that scenario happen, unfortunately, or an intentional transaction. So my recommendation for the listeners is to think about, what is that intent? I believe it's better to give with warm hands than cold hands, certainly. So what is the intent we're working towards? So when I've seen businesses transact, you got a few great examples, whether you're selling to private equity. Private equity looks a little bit different. Private equity could be an aggregator. They also could be another roll-up firm, or they could be just I'm merging in with a firm that kind of looks a little bit private equity-ish, or you have a firm that is taking a bit of ownership in yours, but actually maybe they're taking a board seat, but you still maintain control. You've got that scenario versus an outright sell to a complete third party, an internal transaction, or a merge. And so I look at there's probably four main transactions I tend to see. So pros and cons I'm going to start with internal, because that's often what I see as the biggest desire. Most wealth firms they have a desire, I want to have an internal transition. So the pros are, you can screen out the people, your staff, make sure that they're identified and they're the right fit. They have care, they're stewards for your clients, and it allows for founder owners to maintain and stay in the business, sometimes for a very long period of time beyond what they would where they are exiting, and they can maintain control. A lot of those are pros. The cons, though, is that I see a lot of founders that they haven't fully been willing to say, am I intentionally looking to have a successor? It's more of I want a yes man. I know I need this, I want this, but really I want a yes man or yes woman that's just going to do what I say, and not be willing to give up some control, let go of the reins, and that is that intentionality. And so the other con is what I will see as firms get forced, that they can no longer sustain an internal succession, or they've had failed internal successions because it's wrong fit, or sometimes it's a leadership issue, candidly. And so they're forced to have to actually sell when they want to exit the business, and the aggregator or private equity becomes the only option for that. That's a risk. The second risk or second con is not having enough time remaining in the founder or the owner's time clock that they're wanting to stay in the business, because it could be a decade or 15 plus years for a second gen to be able to have affordability as you're having a step down in selling tranches to the next generation. A lot of times, like, I want to do a 3-year exit. There's not enough time horizon for that. So it's something that I would advise and encourage to be thinking about it now, assuming that there's value fit and this person gets it once, has the capacity to do it. And you don't have to give it to them all at once. So that's kind of a pro and con for the individual, but that's one I see most advisors want. The second scenario is I will see firms that they want to, hey, let me merge. I want to actually, I've been by myself, or I've got a small team, but I want to get to the next level. I don't want to sell to private equity or bigger organization. I want to find a merger type solution. And this is when you see two firms, $200 million firms, or 100 million and 300 million. They're wanting to partner together. The pros are economies of scale. You're now actually able to adopt and engage and get some economies of scale there. Also, I will see organizations that they say, I want to have a seat at the table. I don't want to give up all my control. I want to have influence. That can be a major pro in those merger situations for an organization. And you can also sometimes build some synergy, that you may have different skill sets, and those skill sets, then we can actually bring them in to be aligned. The cons, though, is our service model, is our culture, are some of the things that we're doing too different, where they're not the right fit. If you have one organization that does more straightforward money management, another organization is doing a lot of alts, their investment philosophy may be too far different that they're not willing to come together, even if they have culture alignment or value alignment. It's like, is their business operating structure? That can also be a bit of a con. And then two, I would say another risk or a con for that is they come in, they feel like, I want to have a partner, because that's really what you're doing as a merger, but they still want to be the head honcho. And that's where it's being willing to say, we're doing a business marriage, we're coming in together and incorporating what is our needs for the organization. And I go back to, what's the long-term focus? That what are we building this to? Are we building this to an exit at some point, or are we building this to have further sustainability? Why are you doing the merger at this point? Or is it maybe an individual exit? So that's a merger scenario. The third one is when I say more of an aggregator style and versus a true private equity. There's a lot of similarities to them. Is why join? The pros are, you're able to get into best in price solutions with the custodians and really getting serious economies of scale. You're also being able to build in bigger ecosystem, national branding or regional branding per se. And then the big thing and reason why I see a lot of organizations go that route is, they want to get rid of the accounting and compliance and HR, all of the things that take them away from the business. That is the reason they started to begin with. Because so many listeners here may be resonating and say, I'm spending more of my time doing non-advisory or non-investment related work, and it's taking me away from my passion. And so it can be an easy solution and say, I'm going to sell, and I want to get rid of those things more immediately than over a long-term methodical growth process. So that can be a huge pro that lets them to focus on their highest and best use. They can also get a bite at the apple of maybe the equity in the parent company, potentially, kind of varies from firm to firm, and or be able to take some chips off the table now, maybe still keeping some on the table. It gives them a little bit of stability if most of their assets are built within one firm. The cons, though, loss of control. You have to adopt their system. You're typically not in full control or in charge of everything as you were before. Everyone's got a little bit flavor or nuance in the organization for that. But you're answering effectively to a corporate office, home office type of infrastructure, and you're underneath their brand, their umbrella. And then last but not least is the true private equity model. And the private equity model is, they may or may not change your brand name, but you're selling off a percentage of the organization to private equity. There might be some shared services or even potentially wholly owned, and then they're governed by private equity. So private equity, they're trying to excrete more value out of that firm because there's probably going to be another transaction down the road. That's the one thing that is always the bit of the risk for private equity, is there's typically not one transaction. There may be other ones down the road because they'll retransact at some point in the future. But it can be a liquidity opportunity if someone doesn't have an internal succession, they haven't been able to find a great merger, and they are in a right market, they've got the right type of client base, and it's something that private equity actually wants from that organization. So those are some pros and cons. None of them are right or wrong. They're all unique based on what the objective is for the firm. But just know that, I'd say for the listeners, there's options. You don't have to pick one. There's actually other options, but they do take different types of work to get there.
Absolutely. No, and that's a great primer on kind of the ways to look at it, which is one thing we love to do here, is help understand what that looks like so you can make a cleaner, clearer decision as you travel down that chosen path, whatever it is. One of the things that's great, and it also shares with me and the listeners how you've seen it from a lot of angles, so you're able to dig into what's important to them. And I just know in your heart, your desire to help advisors develop and grow, whatever that means to them, is really what it comes down to. And so as you're helping advisors, and right now your ability has grown tremendously by using the EOS system, at what point, and it could be with you, it could be with anybody that's an expert in EOS, at what point does it make sense for, because we talked about decisions around the succession planning, but there's other decision points when it could be highly valuable for a firm to say, hey, I need to contact somebody, help me guide through this. EOS might be helpful. If they're evaluating that, when would be a good time for them to say, ooh, I need to talk to somebody about EOS?
So I never think it's too late to talk about EOS. I think this is it. EOS is a system, it's a process, and it's all about learning. I mean, my experience is a collection of memories, experiences, challenges, and successes, but also books and learning and seminars and conferences. And so if someone is debating, I think the first thing is exploring and understanding what is available out there. And easily it's the reading traction's a great first step, or Get a Grip is a really great first step if someone's even less curious per se, they're interested. I think a second step is to have an initial discussion with an implementer to really understand what an implementer does and how there could be value. And the question I'll ask my clients is, one, is EOS right for you? And is it right for you right now? It may or may not be based on what they need. And then two, ask them, am I right for you? I may or may not be the right implementer for them based on what they need, and that's okay. It's really finding them the help that they need, where they're at in their growth cycle. And are they in a growth stage? Are they in a maturity stage? Are they in a decline stage based on where they are in their growth cycle? But the first step is being intellectually curious, and secondly is being open and honest. There's got to be a little bit of vulnerability there, because without having some openness and some honesty and a bit of that vulnerability, the chances of growing sustainably are weakened. Now, can you grow through different means? Sure. But I would say that sustained growth. You may have the founder-driven growth. They're going to do that. But if they want to grow from a practice to a business, it's going to take some system. EOS is a system that they could certainly leverage and use if you're going to grow beyond a solo or a practice that's dependent on you as the advisor to moving to a business, and the business then becomes running and operating on its own.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so that helps give some of that structure, because sometimes you just want to know when to have a good conversation. And so everyone knows, there'll be some links in the show notes here, so you can reach out to Jarrod if you have questions on it. And certainly EOS is better and well known every single day out there, I think, as an operating platform. One of the things we like to do is, because we're humans and we like to connect, and you and I have several times, Jarrod, Ranger Ridge is a place you and I have hung out a bit together. Me growing up out in the wilderness, it's a special place when I get to spend some time with you there. And to help understand, so you help out, I don't know if it's on the board, or you help out with Ranger Ridge and develop that. And it's a little bit different business model than financial services. But just so we can understand you better, what's your passion around what you're doing out there at Ranger Ridge?
Yeah, so that's a passion project of mine. So I come from a farm and ranch background, originally out of West Texas, and for the majority of my adult life, I had a passion on being involved in building a ranch project. And so a few years back, myself and a few other partners, or we weren't partners, friends, got together and put together an idea about a legacy project that we're building legacy every day. Legacy is not something at the end of my career or into my life. It's the intentional build legacy every day, which ultimately became what is Ranger Ridge, which is a 6,000 acre master planned luxury ranch community. And we're building it not for ourselves, but also for friends, others that want to buy in or invest and become a property owner out there. And whether they love riding horses or shooting or fishing or playing pickleball or hanging out at the clubhouse or seeing great animals. We have over 60 different species of exotic game out there, and you can drive around and feel like you're on safari, or hunt on safari if that's something that is passion. And so this is really a project for my daughter, that I could be able to bless her beyond even my life, and that she's been able to see something materially built versus just working with other firms and engaging them, which I've got a heart and passion for. But this is also something I've been able to roll up my sleeves and become intimately involved in, to the point where we are right now.
That's awesome. And this leads up to the final question, where we sort of land the plane, we say. When you're sitting out there, now last time I was out there, you were out there fishing on the lake, pulling in some nice, was it trout or bass?
Bass.
Bass. Okay. I was thinking bass. But when you're pulling into the dock after a day of relaxation and you walk up to your cabin or your house, and what you say, it's been a good life, it's been well lived, and this is how people know me. How are they going to know when they think of Jarrod Upton? How are they going to think about you? How do you want them to think about you? This is who Jarrod is.
That's a really great question, Chad. And my goal at the end is that I've had a life worth living, that I've been able to have these proud moments. And it comes back to two things. First is family, is really being able to impart where I've set standards, values, and in character alignment, where my family sees the character of the man that I am, and I hope that I'm still maintaining. But then two, it's beyond me. It's that whether it's in 50 years or even beyond, and that kind of comes back in D, it's having something that I can leave behind that has a greater impact for future generations. I'll close by saying that the intent of this project, and even what I've been building in other areas, or writing or doing things like we're doing today, is my hope is that this will resonate and be of value for people that I will never meet, that they will be able to learn, grow, and prosper, whether through the ranch project, through my EOS work, or other engagement, that they are able to benefit, and I may never have the privilege to meet them.
That's fantastic. It's reaching out, being something bigger than we are, supporting people develop and grow is what I hear. And I think that's why you and I connect so well, Jarrod. So thank you for spending some time with us today. And hopefully the listeners got some tidbits in there, some things to think about. I certainly helps till the soil in my mental brain for sure. And I'm thinking all through the way about things I can either help the team do better, develop or grow myself, or whatever. And so that's why we're here, Jarrod. Every time we talk, it's personal, it's professional. There's a lot of pieces to our life. So thank you for being a good friend and joining us also today. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Chad. It's been a pleasure. I enjoy all of our conversations and look forward to them each time. So thank you. I hope this was valuable to your audience, and I look forward to more of these to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about like a business sort of series where we talk about different operating systems or different ways to approach it, and doing a little short series. That might be fun. And so I'm inviting some feedback from the audience, either through LinkedIn, send me a note if there's something that you find particularly interesting, or you can email me, or however, but this is something, what would be helpful for you? This is really what we want to do. So thanks again. Thanks for joining us, Jarrod. Have a great summer.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.